Welcome to Teaching Middle East. Today we're going to talk about the emergence of Islam. The Quran identified Muhammad as the Khatam al-Nabiyyin, which simply means the seal of the prophets. And that statement is understood to mean that he was the last prophet sent to humanity, and whoever succeeded him might have talent or inspiration, but they were not prophets. Now, as Islam spread throughout the Middle East, Muslims began to rub shoulders with people of other faiths and cultures. And as they chatted in the marketplace over rising price of figs, and the conversation somehow might have changed, moved to religion, someone asked the Muslim, why he's washing before prayer? Why do you and your family all face the direction you do when you pray? And they had to come up with an answer. And in the beginning of Islam, many Muslims perhaps knew what they should do, but they didn't always know why. And this challenged them. They had to explain and to justify themselves and their religion, not just to others, but to themselves. And I suspect you've had to justify and explain why you do what you do in your own faith. Why do you believe or don't believe in certain things? Well, how did Islam, more specifically, get where it is today? And today I want to share with you by drawing on the writings of Dave Peck in his book From Muhammad to Mubarak. And I want to help you see the religion of Islam as we see it today and how it came piecemeal over a period of centuries. It came as scholars and religious thinkers took what resources they had that were left by the Prophet Muhammad's revelations, his words, and his actions to create, define Islamic law, theology, and spirituality. Now, those resources I referred to, they were the Quran, the revelations he received, the Hadith, the sayings of the Prophet, heard by those who were close to him, and the Sunnah, which are the things that the people saw him do through example. Islam emerged between the 7th and 10th centuries through a complex process as Muslims approached religion in 3 different ways: through legalism, reason, and mysticism. Now, all of these have influenced and still do influence Islam today. Now, these are not absolute divisions, because though some groups held tenaciously to one approach over another, it's probably safe to say that all of Islam has used, at least in part, legalism, rationalism, and mysticism to understand and practice their religion. Incidentally, I saw these same approaches to religion as I taught my Christian history course. The Catholics and Protestants used a legalistic approach to define rules and regulations to help lift fallen man to heaven. And on one occasion, they used that legalistic approach to not only limit the power of people's choices in their faith, but sometimes they used it in fear and intimidation to push their agendas. Now, that's the legalistic approach I saw, but during the golden age of medieval Christianity, men like Peter Lombard and Thomas Aquinas regarded humans as intelligent beings capable of understanding themselves and God through reason. And Christians also at one time approached worship through mysticism. For example, in the 4th and 5th century, Christians like St. Anthony, Jerome, and Augustine, they sought seclusion in places in the desert in the Middle East to experience God. Rules and reason, for many mystics, are important tools to help an individual interpret their experience in the quest for God. But to them, they're not substitutes for experience. Well, now that I've introduced the 3 approaches to religion, let's go a little deeper into each one. Let's talk about the first one, legalism. To understand legalism, you have to look at the 3 aspects of Islam that took form as a result of legalism. First, you have to look at Sharia law. Sharia law is simply it's religious rules and principles that Muslims pulled from the Quran, Hadith, and Sunnah. These rules, they regulated everyday religious life, 7 days a week. Now, we call Muslims who adhere to Sharia law as Sunni Muslims or Sunnites. Incidentally, Sunni Muslims make up about 80% of all Muslims. An example of a strict Sharia ideal is the veiling of women. And interesting, it was originally a Christian custom in Byzantium, in the Eastern Roman Empire, and then it was practiced by Muslims later. Now, as you can see by these images, some Muslims believe that a woman merely needed to cover her head with the hijab, and believe that some, on the other hand, believe that a woman should wear a burqa. Queen Rania of Jordan wears neither. Again, it took centuries for Muslims to define their own unique identity. Before Islam emerged as a legal system under Sharia, it formed what Fred M. Donner called a believers movement, meaning that almost any monotheist, meaning a person that believes in the one supreme God, could be a part of Muhammad's ummah. Ummah means community. So even a Jew or a Christian could be a Muslim. Did you know that originally? And the Constitution of Medina, it's a charter written by Muhammad and his followers when he came to live in Medina. It indicates that Jews and Christians were originally included in the Ummah. Here's something interesting. Did you know that originally to become a Muslim, you just nearly had to declare that there is no God but Allah? Because Christian and Jews declared that there was only one God, they were basically in the club. But later, as legalists redefined the Quran, Hadith, and the Sunnah, they formulated a Sharia code that began to exclude these monotheists, such as Jews and Christians. And the legalists said, it's not enough to merely declare that there is no God but Allah. They said, but what made a Muslim is not a generic monotheist, but it was acceptance of Muhammad as a prophet, and not just as any prophet, because the Jews and Christians believe in prophets, but they had to declare that he was the final prophet, the seal of the prophets, the last prophet. Thus, a Muslim was defined as a monotheist who accepted Muhammad as the messenger of God. Now, a series of scholarly attempts over the years to formally define what it meant to be a Muslim in the 8th and 9th centuries resulted in the establishment of at least 4 different schools of Sharia law. At least these are the main orthodox schools. And each of them had their own rules and regulations covering Islamic practices. The first one was the Hanifi school. It was named after Abu Hanifa. And the second was Maliki, named after Maliki bin Anas. And the third one was Shafi'i, named after al-Shafi'i. And the fourth was Hanbali, named after Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Now, these were considered the orthodox schools. All 4 schools make use of the same basic 3 sources. That's important to know. They all relied heavily on the Quran, the Hadith, and the Sunnah to interpret what is Islam. Now, from these schools of Sharia law, these learned men, they called them ulama, and they emerged and came to dominate the teachings of what we call Sunni Islam. They became its judges. They established courts and rendered what's called fatwas. And a fatwa is just a formal legal opinion given by a trained member of the ulama. And in the 11th century, Muslims began to train the ulama, at madrasas. Madrasas are a theological seminary. It's interesting, in the 1960s, the Saudis pumped in billions, $100 billion plus to build mosques and madrasas in Pakistan. And 60 years ago, there were only 240 madrasas. Now there's 24,000. And they also built lots of mosques like this one you see, King Faisal's Mosque in Islamabad, Pakistan. Now, it may appear like there's little difference between these 4 schools at first glance, but those that adhere to that last one I named, the Hanbal school, taken the handball teachings taken to an extreme, have affected our world in many ways. For example, the Hanbali school influenced Saudi Wahhabism, and Wahhabism, taken to the extreme, influenced groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Boko Haram. Well, in summary, the Sunni interpretation of Islam developed over the course of several centuries. Now, the 4 main schools of Sharia help formally define what we call today Sunni Islam. The establishment of the madrasa, the theological seminaries, produced these men called the ulama, and they were educated in Sharia law, and they helped standardize Sunni practice and observance for all Muslims around the world, at least those that adhered to the Sunni way. Today, the Sharia and ulama continue to not only instill Sunni identity, but they also regulate its practice, especially in countries like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Iraq, to name a few. Now, just as Sunni Islam defined itself through the creation of the Sharia, Shiism too developed its own notions of authority and law. Now, I mentioned before, early Muslims favored Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law, Ali, to become their prophet's successor. They were known as the Shi'atu Ali, or the supporters of Ali, or simply as we know, Shiites. Shiism was based upon a key principle that the caliph, or the Muslim leader, as what that means, should and could only be a descendant of Muhammad, a member of the al-Bayt. That just means people of the house or family of the house. Though Ali wasn't Muhammad's biological son, he was his son-in-law because he married Muhammad's daughter, Fatima. Before Ali was Muhammad's son-in-law, though, he was Muhammad's cousin because Ali's dad was Muhammad's uncle Talib. And when his uncle Talib died, Ali lived with Muhammad. And the Shi'at Ali, or first supporters of Ali, not only believed that Ali was the best candidate for leadership because he was related to Muhammad, but they also believed that Ali possessed spiritual gifts and talents bequeathed to him by Allah. Now, another key idea in Shiite belief is that when Ali died, the imamate passed to his son Hassan, and from Hassan to Ali's younger son Hussein. There's another key idea that helps distinguish Shiites from Sunni Muslims. Both Sunni and Shiite Muslims believe in an imam, but in a different way. Imam comes from Arabic, amma, which means one who proceeds to go before. An imam is the person in charge of a mosque and goes before the people and leads the people to daily prayers. All sects of Islam use the meaning of imam in this way that I just defined. Shiites, however, believe the imam is the divinely appointed leader for all believers, and they say there can only be one imam in authority in the world at one time. He is to Shiites what Moses would be to the Jews or Peter would be to the Christians. Shiism believes that the imam has four powers. 1, he's both a religious leader and a political leader. 2, though he's not a prophet, he has authority to interpret the Quran. 3, the imam has the right to interpret, alter, or even update political culture and religious practices. For example, in Iran, when Ayatollah Khomeini came into power, he demanded that women cover their heads. And 4, the imam is appointed by Allah and has the right to govern Islam. Now, over time, different groups of Shiites became divided over the issue who was the rightful imam. And in that debate, 3 main branches over the years started to emerge. They're known as the Fivers, Seveners, and the Twelvers. Now, each of these branches believed their imam, as I mentioned, was the rightful imam. Consequently, there are several men alive today who are considered to be the imam, and each subsect claims its imam is divinely appointed, the leader, the imam. Now, it's too confusing to discuss all the various subsects of Shiism and their imams, but let me just, again, say there were 3 major branches. Let me talk about them: the Fivers, Seveners, and Twelvers. Now, the Fivers, or Zaydis, are a moderate sect of Shia Muslims founded after the death of the 4th Imam in 713. They're sometimes known as Fivers because they broke with other Shiites over the support for the 5th Imam, Muhammad al-Baqir. The Zaydis chose to follow Zayd ibn Ali, who is a grandson of the martyr Hussein, the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad. Now, just hold on. I know it's a little confusing, but the Zaydis chose to follow Zayd ibn Ali because he was the first of Hussein's descendants to rebel against the Umayyad dynasty, which persecuted the Shiites. For example, Zaydis do not believe the Imam is God's representative on earth or has special God-given powers. Now, that's different than the Shiites in Iran. For them, anyone descended from Muhammad's daughter Fatima and her husband Ali may become an Imam. Now, the second branch of Shiites, or the Seveners, or Ismailis, is a movement emerged between about 900 1200 AD. And they take their name from Ismail, son of Jafar al-Sadiq, the sixth Imam. Jafar had named Ismail as his successor, but Ismail died before his father. And after Jafar's death in 765, many of his followers still considered Ismail to be the seventh Imam because Dad declared him to be, because he was in that line. Today, Ismaili communities exist in countries like Syria, Central Asia, Iran, Africa, North America, and Europe. And there's about 2 million worldwide today. Now, even though there's three different factions, three different branches of Shiites, the lion's share of them are the Twelvers. They are the ones that, when people talk about Shiites, they are the ones that are usually generally referred to. And the Twelvers come from the idea that the 12th Imam in the line of Ali, he disappeared in 874 AD while he was still a child. So his followers didn't have a successor. They solved that problem, though, by establishing the doctrine they called the hidden Imam. It states that the 12th Imam never died, but will remain in an unseen spiritual form until the end of the world. Now, this idea is also called occultation. And the Twelvers believe that the hidden Imam will return at the end of the world as they call him the Mahdi, a divinely guided leader who will restore justice and equality on the earth. Twelvers also believe that there is a deputy of the hidden Imam. This deputy acts as his kind of ambassador, his representative. He can interpret Islamic law using independent reasoning. The most respected of these leaders are the Ayatollahs, a title that means signs of God. Now, the role of the Ayatollahs is to provide guidance to the faithful while they await the coming of the Mahdi. The Twelvers are considered the largest branch of the Shiite Muslims, and they comprise the majority in present-day Iran. You can find them also in Iraq, Lebanon, and in Bahrain. Now, in summary, there are numerous subsects within Shiism, and it may be said that nearly all Shiites hold to the ideas that, number one, Ali, Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law, was divinely commissioned to be his first successor or caliph, leader of the Islamic community, and Ali possessed divine authority to correctly interpret and apply the revelations given to Muhammad. And Ali passed his imamate to his older son Hassan, and from Hassan it was passed to Ali's younger son Hussein. And that authority, the authority of the imam, was subsequently passed down from among the male members of the Ali family. Now, as you can see, interpreting religion through a legalistic lens, there were many factions among the Muslims, among the split the Sunnis and the Shiites, but also there were splits among the Shiites. But there are also some similarities as well as differences. For example, most Muslims adhere to the 5 pillars, and the 5 pillars you can see here in this image of they're the Islamic belief and practice accepted by most Muslims today. And there are also the 6 articles of faith that most Muslims adhere. Now I will talk more about the 5 pillars and the 6 articles in class, but let me move to the second approach that Muslims interpreted religion by, and that is through rationalism, through reason, through philosophy. Now, as the Arab empires, it moved into ancient cities like Damascus, Arabians came into direct contact with peoples living under the Eastern Roman Empire called Byzantium. And this region had access to ancient Greek philosophy and science. The Muslims translated the writings of Plato and Aristotle and others into Arabic. Historians call this time period the translation movement. Now, by the end of the Umayyad dynasty in 750 AD, a large body of works were available in Arabic, and the result of the translation movement affected the emergence of Islam in important ways. For example, Al-Kindi, traditionally called the father of Islamic philosophy, he authored over 200 books on subjects like geometry, alchemy, medicine, meteorology, and religion. And as Al-Kindi read these ancient Greek texts of theology and metaphysics, he felt that the ideas in these books could be harmonized with the theological concepts found in the Quran. And Al-Kindi faced an important challenge from more conservative Muslim legalists as he sought to harmonize Islam and Greek philosophy. I mean, some of the conservatives said, well, why bother with these pagan writers who worshipped idols? We got the Quran. And Al-Kindi would respond, well, hey, Allah gave us the ability to think and the power to choose. I can use my reason that I glean from these great thinkers to understand truth and to make choices for myself. Now put that in your shisha pipe and smoke it. Now, I probably didn't say that, but now there was another one great thinker during that time, during the translation movement, Ibn Sina. Now he focused on even more explicitly religious topics like prayer, the afterlife, and pilgrimage. He sought to construct a purely metaphysical proof for the existence of God. Now, in summary of this rationalistic reason philosophical approach to religion, through the process of discovering ancient texts, these ancient great texts from like Aristotle and Plato and Plotinus and others, and translating them into Arabic, this led not only to the assimilation of ancient ideas and methods into the religion and society of emerging Islam, but it also resulted in profound Islamic intellectual innovation in many, many different ways. So while the world was languishing in the Dark Ages, the Islamic world is experiencing this renaissance of understanding and medicine and mathematics and different kinds of science. Now let's look at this last approach Muslims use to interpret and justify and understand their faith of Islam. According to Tamim Ansari in Destiny Disrupted, a look at the world through Islamic eyes, by the way, an exceptionally informative and interesting book, he said that during the same time that Muhammad's followers are trying to explain and justify and codify their religion for themselves, there were other people, a group of people called Sufis, who are saying, hey, is this all that revelation comes to in the end? Just a bunch of rules? Because if that's the case, I'm not feeling it. Is there something more to Islam? Instructions from God were all very well, but some people longed to experience God. The Sufis wanted to experience God, experience His presence right now, right here. What they wanted from the revelations was a transformation, a transcendence. Now, this doesn't mean that the Sufis rejected reason and revelation. Sufis believed that reason was a means, not an end, though. Now, reason could help an individual understand and apply truth by guiding them feeling, sensing, and experiencing God. Now, a few of these people began to experiment with spiritual exercises that went way beyond the requirements of duty. For example, they read the Quran incessantly. Now, this is not all of them. This was some. Or they spent hours reciting the names of Allah. In Baghdad, for example, there was a man named Al-Junaid who habitually performed 400 units of the Muslim prayer ritual after work every day. Now, some of the Sufis even embraced voluntary poverty. They lived on bread and water. They dispensed of their furniture and other objects and material things. They wore simple garments made of rough, uncarded wool, which is called suf in Arabic, which is why we call them the Sufis. They developed a technique to remove distractions and cravings, not just from prayer, but from life. Some spoke of engaging in spiritual warfare against their own meanest tendencies, harking back to a hadith in which Muhammad distinguished between a greater and a lesser jihad. Jihad just means to strive, to exert, to fight. They declared that the internal fight or struggle was to expunge the ego. That to them was the real jihad, the greater jihad. The lesser jihad they identified as a struggle against eternal enemies of the community. Now, in conclusion, as Muslims sought to explain and to justify themselves and their religion, Islam as we know it today began to emerge between the 7th and 10th century. It emerged as scholars and religious thinkers sought to define Islamic law, theology, and spirituality through the revelations of the Quran, the Prophet's sayings in the Hadith, and the Prophet's doings in the Sunnah. Now, it didn't happen overnight, but through a process. Now, that process was influenced, remember, by three main sources. This is important. It was influenced by the legalist approach. Whether Sunni or Shiite, they wanted to standardize ritual practice in Islam. And number two, it was influenced by rationalist thinking. They wanted to harmonize Greek philosophy with the Quran. And third, Islam was influenced by the mystics who wanted to experience God through self-examination, meditation, solitude, and prayer, like I told you about with the Sufis. So, by the 10th century, the basic key beliefs and rituals of Islam were in place. Islam had emerged as a major world religion. Thanks for listening today. I hope this helped you understand the emergence of Islam. If you want to know more, go to Teach Middle East at kirkcostello.org.